Welcome in, everybody, to Odds and Ends here on bet.nola.com. Brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. Zach Ewing, along with Devin Jackson and Jim Derry. Myself and these two gentlemen will be with you for the next hour or so. We're going to talk a ton of CFP Championship game tonight. Georgia versus Alabama starting in about 3 hours. We will talk a ton of NFL wildcard action. We'll do a little obit on the Saints season. And we will even sprinkle in a little bit of basketball today on Odds and Ends as we await the launch of mobile betting in the state of Louisiana. We saw it go live in New York last Saturday. Too much fanfare. Louisiana is coming next. We hear it is going to be this month. Don't know exactly when. Could be this week. Could be in 2 weeks. Could be in 3 weeks. We don't know. But it is coming. And when it comes, you want to be ready. So sign up now for the Caesar Sportsbook app. Get your bonus. Get the special NOLA.com bonus at NOLA.com/Caesars. It's a $100 free bet bonus. Whatever you deposit, they will match up to $100. And by the way, there is more bonuses coming, we think. We can't tell for sure, but when launch comes, and if you sign up now, you will get those bonuses when they happen, when the launch happens. So sign up now. Be ready. You won't miss out on anything. In fact, you'll be in better position to get them. And when betting does go live, you can be right there with it. And we will be right there with it. And we will keep talking to you every Monday on Odds and Ends, every Thursday on At the Book. Jim Derry's got Datitude twice a week. We'll bring back the Fantasy Roundup as we get a little bit closer to baseball season and then the NFL Draft, if there is a baseball season. In the meantime, we still have plenty of football to talk about. And that begins tonight, Alabama and Georgia in the SEC Championship game. Line has not changed from a week ago at Caesars. It is Georgia minus 2.5, a total of 52.5. And this is the big one, of course, the rematch of the SEC Championship game. Nick Saban against his protege, Kirby Smart. They are in Indianapolis. It will be cold outside, but it'll be rocking inside Lucas Oil Stadium. Devin, let's start with you. What is your take on this one? Because I think Jim and I have made pretty clear the way we feel about it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a much closer game than the SEC Championship. And I think it kind of has to be for Georgia to win this game. You can't get into a track meet with Alabama offense. They're so explosive and they're able to score from pretty much anywhere on the field. And we've seen that. We saw it in the SEC Championship. We've seen it all season. So it'll be important for Georgia to not only get off to a good start, but get off the field, force 3 and outs, force Alabama to pump the ball and play a game where every possession for them, they're going to have to work for whatever they get. So I think this is going to be an entertaining defensive battle for most of the first half. I do think some points will be scored, but I have a feeling that it will definitely hit the under 52.5 in this matchup compared to last time.
Yeah, so Devin likes the under. Jim and I both like Georgia. We'll wait to the end of the show for our specific picks on this one. Although if you read our bowl picks, our final Jeopardy picks, then you will see where we all stand on the thing. But we'll make specific picks at the end of the show as we normally do with Monday Night Football. Of course, Monday Night Football is the college game this week. And it's going to be a doozy. Jim, any additional thoughts you have created over the weekend on this thing besides what we talked about Thursday?
Yeah, I have a question for Devin. I was wondering if he thought it would be closer than what he expected the North Dakota-Montana State game to be.
Definitely. That game got out of hand pretty early. So I will take the loss for that one because that one was ugly from start to finish.
Listen, I knew that was going to – we got to take the hit on that one too. Devin's been red hot all season long. As soon as we both tailed him, FCS Championship game, I want to have some action on this. Devin, what do you like? And as soon as he took it, it was a poison pill, man. So that was the end of that.
I'm just saying one of us here on screen has a chance to be 8-0 for the second time in 4 weeks. I don't know which one of us that is. I'll have to do a little research. I'll get back to you on it.
How's Big Bucks going, though?
Big Bucks is going. I'm losing as much money in Big Bucks as I am as cashing with Carvo. Oh wait, we're not doing real money. So it was a good week for me again. 2 weeks in a row with real money.
Nick's
seriously, and all kidding aside, the only thing that I lost this weekend was the big bucks teaser. Actually, I did put real money on the big bucks teaser that I did. That's the only thing I lost money on, which means that I'll probably
let you down.
Yeah, which means Alabama will probably win by 17 tonight because I really think Georgia is gonna roll.
You and I have some stake in the game on a bowl pool. We need to make quite a bit of money if Georgia wins, and so both of us have hedged the other way, so that we're in good shape either way. It's where you mitigate your risk, right?
Yeah, I'm rooting for you.
But the key here would be we both got Alabama +3. They win that game by 2 or 3 points, man. We're in. If Georgia wins the game by 2 or 3 points, then we're in real good shape.
Yeah, I mean, I'd gladly take a push if Georgia wins by 3. In fact, I'm almost rooting. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I want Georgia to win by a lot, so I have to sweat. But if it comes down to a sweat, then I hope Georgia either wins by exactly 3. I'll take the push on my hedge, or win by 1 or 2. We win the whole thing. Plus, we win the hedge too. That'd be just super swell. But I'm not going to be greedy. I'll take Georgia by 10.
No, you're right. You hedge because you don't want to be greedy. That's exactly why you do it. Hey, I'll take winnings. And winnings are good at any point. As Uncle Big Nick says, in your own memory, you're 70%. So
yeah, Uncle Big Nick, he doesn't know anything about hedging. He's too greedy to hedge anything. He could literally have $100,000 off a $100 bet on the line, and he wouldn't hedge the other way because he's the greediest bettor I've ever met.
He's like the type of guy who would root for a team to go 88 yards in a minute and a half with no timeouts to tie a game.
Something like that.
Sticking the knife in with that Debo jersey there, man.
Yeah, you know what's hilarious about Uncle Big Nick? We talk about him, and he's been dogging on Jimmy G all year long about how he hates Jimmy G. And now he'd probably take Jimmy G to dinner, dessert, and a movie if Jimmy G would let him do it. So
Jimmy G might even get lucky.
You never know.
That's right. Yeah, he did it in 61 seconds. It was from 120. He even left the Rams 26 seconds at the end. OG Sean the Don says, "Man, who dat?" And listen, that's all you can say. I think Saints fans have to be proud. Let's look at the NFL results from yesterday. The Saints did finish with a victory. They beat the Falcons 30-20. They covered the spread. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. The Jaguars with the shock of the day. That line had gone from 15.5 down to 14. The Sharps were all over Jacksonville. You could kind of see that being a close game. I mean, I personally, even though I saw that coming just looking at where the money was going, you couldn't have expected the Jaguars to win by 2 touchdowns. And it was 26-3 until late. There's no way you expect that.
No, and I had my money on Jacksonville too because I thought it would be close. And I got to say, these guys I listen to, they do a really cool podcast every week. It's a little long sometimes, but they get in all these different odds and trends and different sorts of things. And one of the things they talked about was if you took the wins and losses, okay, that Jacksonville has every year, and this weird way of extrapolating the odds of Jacksonville beating Indianapolis at home 7 years in a row, and this is going into yesterday. This is before yesterday. They calculated that the odds of that happening with the team with their record beating a team like the Colts 7 years in a row at home, it was along the lines of 72,000 to 1. So if that's before yesterday, so I'm imagining it'd be if you exponentially put on another one, it'd be in the neighborhood of 100,000 to 1. It's insane that for some reason the Jaguars just have the Colts number at home. Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since 2014, which is just really hard to believe considering all the bad Jags team. One of them was 1-15. Their only win all year was beating the Colts at home one year.
Isn't that amazing? And by the way, the Titans had a huge lead on Houston, and they almost let the Texans come back. They were up 21-0 at halftime with a bye on the line. They did hold on. And then there were the 3 overtime games. I mean, just the NFL, we were texting about it last night, just hardly ever fails to deliver fantastic theater, no matter what your rooting interests are. All 3 of those overtime games had huge playoff impacts because when the Steelers-Ravens game was in overtime, at that point you knew the Colts were going to lose. So this is all of a sudden a huge game. Steelers pull that one out in overtime. Then they really pull another one out in overtime on Sunday night because they needed that game to not end in a tie. And, of course, it was into the final minute and tied, and the Raiders kicked a long field goal. And the Raiders, I think, had they not gotten that last first down, would have been content to just say, okay, let's tie. And then, of course, the other one, the one that'll sting for Saints fans, the 49ers coming back from 17-0 down. They tie up the Rams in the final minute and then win it in overtime, 27-24. Look, again, we talked about this. I think James Carville put it really well on Thursday. It's hard to win a parlay, right? The Saints needed to win a parlay. They needed to beat the Falcons and have the Rams beat the 49ers. Something was sort of bound to go wrong in games that you figure are going to be competitive, and it did.
We talked about, sorry, I know it's Devin's turn. We talked about it, though, beforehand, and you and I both agreed that it just wasn't a good matchup for the Rams. It's still not. Yeah, I mean, just like I think if the Saints got in there and gone and played the Rams, that wouldn't have been a good matchup for the Saints, especially now considering not getting the whole Simeon thing again. You got to figure Taysom Hill probably would have been out for the season, regardless, with the list, or at least severely limited at the bare minimum. It would not have been a good matchup for the Saints. I think the Saints would have got crushed by the Rams. But going the other way, the 49ers deserve to be in. It's just plain and simple. They were the better team yesterday, and really, they're playing really well right now. I would not want to play the 49ers, and Uncle Big Nick will get kicks out of this. But, I mean, just being realistic, and it's not a good matchup for Dallas either. I mean, Dallas probably is not happy with their draw at all. And I'll tell you, we're going to get to the odds in a minute, but I really like San Francisco at the high number that they're at. I mean, I'd take a flyer on them to make it to the Super Bowl. I don't think anybody's going to beat Green Bay in the NFC anyway, but if anybody's going to do it, I think it's going to be San Francisco, or, I mean, I guess you can never count out Tampa Bay, even though I still think they're a mess. But it's going to be interesting in the NFC. AFC, you could just throw 7 cards in the air and pick one of them.
I love San Francisco in Dallas this week. I don't know about making it all the way to the Super Bowl, but I do like that for them. And I sort of have a theory, Devin. I want to get your thoughts on it too, but this is probably not the case, but it's interesting because it was during the 2-minute warning of overtime in that Rams-Niners game that the Cardinals-Seahawks game went final. The Rams-Niners was going faster than the others. So the Cardinals-Seahawks went final. Cardinals lost. It was the 2-minute warning of overtime. And you just wonder if somebody went to McVay and said, listen, the Cardinals lost. We've got the division wrapped up. If we tie, we're facing the Niners again. So either go win it and get to the 2 seed and you're getting Philadelphia, or lose it and we're getting Arizona, who we feel better about the San. And so what did they do? The first play out of the 2-minute warning, they went deep and they got it picked off. I don't know. It's probably that's the case, but I could see the argument for why they would want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in a game like that, think about it from the Rams' perspective. You want to beat the 49ers. This is a team you struggle with and you could possibly face in the playoffs. You have a chance to knock them out. I think they were trying to go for it all there and not really thinking about the playoff matchup per se, but trying to go out and win the game. Now, there's some other questionable things they did during the game. They had like a third down call that they had that gave the 49ers back. They ran the ball instead of being aggressive and throwing the football there. Had success throwing the football down the field to like Cooper Kupp and whatnot. So to me, there were some other decisions they made during that game that you could point to and say maybe they could have been a little bit more aggressive or did a little bit more in terms of play calling. But I do think thinking
Yeah, I think we're losing you a little bit there, Devin. But I think that's interesting. Jim, you were shaking your head as I was talking.
Yeah, I have. First off, here's the thing, and this has gotten this kind of the second year in a row now that we have a 7 seed by everyone in the media. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. I have not heard anyone say this. The 2 seed matters. It doesn't quite matter as much as when you got to buy, but it's still huge. It means you play it. If you win your first game, you play at home in the second round, in the divisional round, no matter what. It has gotten overlooked again. People say, well, they're not going to get the bye. They're going to have the 2 seed matters way more than getting a 3 seed or a 4 seed. If you're going to be a 3 or 4, that doesn't matter as much. You don't worry about your opponent. You don't think about who your opponent's going to be if you got a chance to be the 2 seed. And I think you saw there was a clip of Arians going over and talking to Tom Brady, I think last night, basically telling him that the 49ers came back and that they're going to be the 2 seed. And he was like, what? It matters. They understand it matters. So there is zero chance that the Rams were letting up or going to play for a tie or anything like that. Beyond what what Devin said is true as well. I mean, you want to beat the 49ers and knock them out of the playoff. You'd much rather play the Saints than anyone else. I mean, and our Whodats can say they wouldn't want to face the Saints defense and blah, blah, blah. Malarkey. If Rams could have picked someone that was eligible left to play in the playoffs, hand-picked someone, I promise you it would have been the Saints, just like last year when the Saints got the Bears. I guarantee you that's who they would have hand-picked to play. You want the 2 seed. It is a big deal, and I promise you the Rams are playing to win.
But see, this is where you guys missed my point just a little bit. I'm saying he either wanted to win or lose. He want to tie because a tie was a 3 seed in the Niners. That was the outcome they didn't want. If they lost,
I wasn't chastising your comment. I just mean overreaching. I hear this by the meet. I heard it in every game yesterday when they were talking about a 2 seed or a 3. Like, it doesn't matter if you get the 2 seed. I wasn't necessarily meaning you. I'm just saying getting that 2 seed really, I mean, it's not quite getting the 1 seed and getting the bye next week, but it's the closest thing to it. And to be able to know you're playing at home in the divisional round and to be able to avoid that 1 seed and going on the road to the 1 seed until potentially the championship game, it is a big deal.
No, I agree. The Bills had it last year, I think, in the AFC. He's had it in the NFC. You like having that game at home, and you get the weakest opponent. In this case, get Philadelphia, who the Rams may have Philadelphia, but I don't know, because I do think the Saints defense causes anybody problems. Now, the Rams are probably pretty big favorites over either one of those teams. But I guess my thing was some people were saying, the Rams were okay with a tie because they won the division with a tie. I don't know about that because the win meant a lot to them. I don't think they wanted to lose necessarily, but I also don't think they wanted to tie, which means they're a little massive play calling in overtime, and it just didn't work out. Now that let's do a little postmortem on the Saints season. If you want more on this, check out Data this morning because Jim, you talked to Jeff
you're making me think of White Men Can't Jump. I'm thinking of Woody Harrelson. And let's see, if you win, you actually lose. If you lose, you tie. If you tie,
yeah, no, that's about what it was. I mean that, and honestly, like last night's game was even more like that, right? That was the Woody Harrelson.
There's no doubt.
Mind blowing.
That poor Steelers fan at the end, he looked like he was just in pain.
Oh, I cackled every time they showed him on TV because we've all been there, fans, right? We've all felt that way, like, oh God, I'm just sick, but I can't stop watching, and why am I doing this?
It was awesome.
Anyway, if you were about the Saints season, what they accomplished this year, what they weren't this year, and where they go going forward, listen to Datitude. It's on bet.nola.com. Jim had Jeff Duncan on this morning. It's a great listen. But I do want to ask you guys while we're on the show, Devin, let's start with you. This is your first season in New Orleans. The Saints team, by all rights, fair to say, they had no right being successful this year. Look at all the things that happened to them. They lost a bunch of good players from last year because they had to cut cap space. They lost Jameis Winston in week 7. Always week 8. It was game 7. They lost Taysom Hill for most of the rest of the season. He played a few games. They had 3 games all year where they had their full defense healthy. I mean, they had the COVID game that was like an automatic loss, and then another game early in the Carolina where they had nobody. If you add stuff up and say that team went 9-8, you wouldn't believe it. They went 9-8 within an going to the. So, what were your impressions this season, and how should Saints fans feel about it?
I think it was a successful season. I think you look back and see that without everything going on, all the injuries, you take everything into account. You can't be mad about how the season shook out. You know, they had a chance in week 18 to make the playoffs. They had a chance to still make it, and they weren't able to. So I think for the Saints, they have to feel pretty good about what's happening for them or what happened to them, and you know, you just have to be happy with how things turned out, even though they didn't get to the playoffs. I think we all can agree that with Taysom Hill's foot injury yesterday, that it would have been even yet another hill that they had to climb to be competitive against the Rams. So I think when you take everything into consideration, this is Sean Payton's probably his best coaching job that he's ever done. Had 4 different quarterbacks starting, had your star running back out for a couple games, Alvin Kamara. You had your star receiver not play an entire snap this year, and you still get 9 wins. it's a pretty damn good season to say myself.
Jim, the biggest question off season is fair to say is the quarterback.
There's zero question about that. I would be shocked if any of these four quarterbacks are starting under center the first game, September 2022, whatever day that is, whoever the opponent is. I just don't think it's going to be Jameis Winston, and he's the only one that has a legitimate chance to be the starting quarterback. It could be. But as Duncan talked about this morning, you look at it and really, I think in the eyes of most people in the NFL, although Jameis Winston was progressing, he did a lot better than I think most of us thought he would do. I just don't think that that's kind of the direction that Sean Payton's going to go in. When you talk about realizing that how limited his future is as far as being coach, he's getting up there. He's not going to be one of these guys like Pete Carroll coaches into his 70s. I don't think he's going to be coaching when he's 70. I think he's going to want to long retire. So I think the Saints are going to find a way to go get a quarterback in the offseason, no matter whether it's there are some options. I mean, everybody talks about Russell Wilson. Jeff Duncan had a great point that he thinks it's going to take way too much from Seattle to get Russell Wilson. Maybe Derek Carr, we talked about it. I know that would be great for you, Zach. Jimmy G is a possibility. There are guys out there, but I just don't think it's going to be Jameis Winston. And it's certainly not going to be any of the other three guys. They are not starting capable. And I don't think it's going to be anyone in the draft because I think they draft too low, and I don't think there's anyone in the draft that's going to be there at 18 that can start as a rookie.
I agree with all of that, except that I guess I would consider Jameis the favorite simply because of what you said. Number one, Wilson's can be very, very, very expensive in terms of draft picks. Jameis wants to be here, I think. He's taking pictures of fans on the side of the field yesterday. And so from that side of it, he wants to be here. And so maybe he takes a little bit less so that they can re-sign guys. I guess my question would be, you mentioned a guy like Jimmy G and even Derek Carr to a certain extent. How much of an improvement are those guys over Jameis? I think Carr is, but not a ton. I don't know that Jimmy – I mean, why go out and get those guys when you may have a better answer in-house?
It's a hard question to answer. I think that Peyton probably thinks that those two would be an upgrade. Are they? I'm not sure. If you would have asked me in September, I would say absolutely. If you asked me after I saw him run this offense for 7 weeks, I would say I'm not as sure because he certainly improved over the course of 7 weeks. But you also talk about a quarterback that would be coming off an ACL injury, and Peyton's not going to want to waste another season. I just don't know that he's going to want to – I think he'd rather just trying to pick his brain without being able to sit here and talk to him. I think that he's going to want to go out in free agency and get someone. I just think that's the case. And look, I've become kind of a James fan. I really, towards that Tampa Bay game when he looked like he was really finally starting to get this offense, and he wasn't making the mistakes we saw him make in Tampa Bay. Somehow Peyton had either fixed that or limited that or got him to think, and he wasn't being as super careful. You remember we talked about how early in the season, even in the Green Bay game, how even though he threw 5 touchdown passes, he wasn't accurate at all. He was playing not to throw a pick, and he kind of got out of that a little bit as he went along. But I don't know. I just don't think that he's the guy that Peyton's going to want to go to the dance with. I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, Russ Wilson is the number one choice, but I just don't know that the Saints can afford it. He's certainly my number one choice because I think Russell Wilson fits this offense maybe better than any other quarterback in the NFL, and that includes Aaron Rodgers, and people can shake their head. I just think Russell Wilson will be the absolute perfect quarterback, cerebral, fit in, gets it, just know it's kind of Drew Brees-like almost. So that's be my first pick, but I don't know if we're going to see that.
Yeah, Richard says here motivated Winston could be the best option. I mean, I like obviously if you can get Wilson and maybe later in the offseason we can talk about possible packages for Russell Wilson. Like for instance, Jim, is this realistic and would you do it? This year's first round pick, next year's first round pick and Jameis plus another, mid-level veteran for Russell Wilson.
Yes, I would probably do it. That is pretty steep. That'd be about the limit. It depends on who that mid-level veteran is. But is Jameis under contract? I thought he signed a 1-year contract.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now that I mentioned that, it might not be.
So you
You might
couldn't
have to
trade him.
sign him and then talk. I don't know what the
They
ethics
don't really
of that
do a
are.
lot of sign and trades in the NFL, but regardless, so basically 2 number ones and a mid-level veteran, and then they can go get a quarterback. Here's the thing: I think they're talking a lot of smack. I think Pete Carroll's gonna go. I think they're gonna have to start over, and if they're starting over, why would you keep Russell Wilson as part of all that? I think he's going to be easier to get than some people think, even Jeff Duncan. And I understand where he's coming from, but and 90%, he's right about 90% of the time. These things that they get talked about, especially this early, don't come to fruition, and they're just a bunch of talk, and then they're perpetuated by us in the media. But I think in this case, it's a perfect fit. There aren't a lot of teams that he'd be willing to go to, which is one of the things that I think works in the Saints' favor. So if he is going to leave, you got to think the Saints are pretty close to number one on the list of where he'd go.
No, I would think so, and that's the home run. I will say this, and this is sort of to Richard's point too, that if you can't go get Wilson, Jameis may be the best option because number one, he knows the offense. Number two, he's been here. He wants to be here. And look, the Saints, if Winston stays healthy all year, I think they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders.
Oh, there's no question.
They're not favorites, but they're contenders. I mean, they would have been, they probably wouldn't win the division over Tampa Bay anyway, but they're probably 5 seed, at worst a dangerous 6 seed going to Dallas. They're a contender in the form that the 49ers are a contender right now if Jameis is healthy, I think. And so, it's a hard question to answer.
They're certainly a playoff team. They're certainly a playoff team if Winston is. They win at least one, if not 2, of the games that they lost with Jameis Winston at quarterback. No question. And there's zero question. I'll debate anyone that wants to debate this. There's zero question he's better than any of the other 3 guys that started at quarterback for the Saints this year.
I don't think there's any question about that. Taysom Hill is a talented player, but if he's your quarterback, you have quarterback problems. I mean, he's a talented player who should be playing, but he shouldn't be the QB1. Let's move on. Let's look at some next.
That's not why he made a lot of money. He didn't make a lot of money to be the Saints starting quarterback.
That's right. You're watching Odds and Ends on bet.nola.com, brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. We'll take a wild card round odds, the early odds here. These will move throughout the week, have moved already a little bit in some cases. The 2 Saturday games, both AFC games, Raiders at Bengals. The line is just under a touchdown there. Bills 4.5-point favorites against the Patriots. Remember, the first time those two teams played in Orchard Park, it was the wind game. The Patriots won despite only throwing 3 passes. Then on Sunday, you get a couple of NFC games. That line's already moved. It opened Bucks -7, already up to 8.5. Cowboys, a field goal favorite against the Niners. The Chiefs, that line I think is ticked down from 13. It's now 12.5 against the Steelers. And then Monday night Rams -4 against the Cards. Devin, any lines here that appeal to you?
There's a couple of different ones I think are interesting. The Steelers line I think is interesting, not because I don't think the Steelers are going to win the game, but 12.5 for a playoff game, it just seems steep. Now I know the Steelers are kind of on the last legs with Ben Roethlisberger, but you have to believe that they're going to be able to at least score some points against the Chiefs defense, even though they're much better than they were earlier in the season. They still have some issues in the secondary. So that's a line that I think is an interesting one to watch to see if it ticks down some more before game time. But I do think that's a bit high for the game being played. Other one is the Raiders and Bengals. I know the Bengals have been flying high, have been really good offensively, but these are 2 teams that have not seen the playoffs a lot in recent history. So I think that game is going to be a lot closer than the line suggests, and I would not be surprised if the Raiders were competitive throughout. So those are the 2 games that immediately stick out to me.
Yeah, that reminds me a little discussion we have with Georgia about tonight's game is yes, they're talented. They're probably the better team there. And maybe the Burrow factor takes away from this, but that team hasn't won a playoff game in 30 years. I mean, whether you were there for all of that time or not, there's some pressure there. And then I agree with you. The Steelers line seems high. I had that pegged, sort of the thing you ought to do as a bettor is try to kind of guess or handicap what the lines will be, and then more easily see where the value is. And I had that thing pegged at like 11 or 11.5. So I thought 13 was a little high. I will say the Chiefs had a 36-3 lead on the Steelers at the end of the third quarter. So they're capable of blowing that team out. Jim, what are your takes?
I couldn't disagree with you guys more. I know you're shocked. I think the Steelers get their keisters handed to them, and that's putting it nicely. I think the Chiefs are about to go into attitude mode. The Steelers are, you can bet, I like them both week before last and last week. If for anything else, they were going to send Big Ben out on as big of a magic carpet as they could possibly get. I don't think any of those Steelers really believed going into Sunday that they're going to make the playoffs. And I think that this is just lanyard for them. Big Ben goes out in the playoffs, great. But the Chiefs, to me, are the best team in the AFC. And the Steelers, we talked about it kind of texting back and forth yesterday, are one of the worst wild cards we've ever seen. I still think the Bears last year were probably a little bit worse than this Steelers team, but this Steelers team is not good. And TJ Watt, I think, he looked like he was banged up a little bit in the second half yesterday against the Ravens. If they don't have him, they're in real trouble. I mean, if he's limited, they're in real trouble. Yeah, I mean, even if he's limited, they're in real trouble. So I haven't done my full handicap yet, so this is early. I may change my mind, but and Duncan talks about it, how there are a decent amount of underdogs that cover in this round. But just looking at this list, I don't really see an underdog that I like. I mean, I may change my mind. I may pick the 49ers. I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you now, I'm going to pick the Bills for sure. I'm going to pick the Chiefs for sure. I'm going to pick the Bucks for sure. Those are the three that I probably my handicap is not going to change. So the other ones I'll have to really look at a little bit closer. And Bengals Raiders, if they were playing a team that was in the playoffs a bunch, I do agree that it's weird when you don't go to the playoffs a lot and you get there and you don't know what to expect and all that. But the Raiders don't go to the playoffs a whole lot either. So it's not like they're used to being there. So I don't think the Bengals are thinking that way. And I think the Raiders pass defense, especially, they've got some big-time injuries along the defensive front. I can't remember what the guy's name is, the one that suffered the knee injury there at the end of the game. But he had a monster game last night, and he's out. Yeah, that's it. He's out next week. So I think the Bengals are going to be able to do what they want next week against the Raiders. I really like Cincinnati next week. But the Chiefs and Cincinnati are the two that I probably like. But Tampa Bay, the Eagles, what do they do best? They run the football. They can't throw the football. What do the Bucks do? They stop the run. The Eagles can't beat Tampa Bay. They're going to get that might be the biggest blowout of the first round.
Yeah, they did play in the regular season. It was only a 6-point game, but that was in Philly for one thing, and for another thing,
Jalen Hurts is banged up too, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Pittsburgh or Philly, either one of them. I mean, it's hard to say, oh, they're the worst wild card teams of all time. Well, they're 7 seeds, so they're right. They wouldn't be in the playoffs any other year before last year. So, but they're not any good. Just like the Bears weren't any good. The other 7 seed last year was the Colts, I think, and they were actually a pretty good team. But this we're getting what. My God, we're getting what we what the NFL signed us up for, right? Is these 7 seeds are not very good. They're teams that in any other year in NFL history would be sitting at home, and instead they're facing a team that would normally be getting a bye any other year in NFL history. And so,
but Zach, even though that's true, and you might get a mismatch, it might not be worth it for this weekend. Like Duncan was talking about earlier, and I was really opposed to the 7 seed thing even before this year, probably. But when I watched the way the end of this season came down and how exciting it made the last few weeks, and especially yesterday, all about that 7 seed just getting in, it's changed my mind. I mean, it may stink next week, and we may say, see, these teams don't belong in. We probably will. But you know what? It made yesterday pretty darn fun.
Yeah, and sooner or later, one of these teams is going to win a 10-point as a 10-point underdog. I mean, I don't know if it'll happen this weekend, but one of these times it is going to happen. Let's take a quick look through some NFL futures while we're on the topic. We're going to start with the NFC. Here are odds to win the NFC. And Jim, you were talking about this as the Niners kind of a worthy long shot bid down at 12-1. I know there's a lot of people who like the Cowboys. I think that price a little inflated, as Cowboys prices usually are, at 6-1.
That's way too high. I won't touch that with a stick. Yeah. If I think the best value on this list is unquestionably the 49ers. I honestly think that's not a bad price on the Packers at 1.7-1. You're talking about,
I agree.
Nearly 2-1. I think if they play this thing out 10 times, I think Green Bay wins 6 or 7 times. I think that's actually a pretty decent price. I just think the Bucs, who normally would, if you would have talked about earlier in the season, would be the only team that could beat them, or maybe the 49ers. If you're looking, you got to think about who can beat Green Bay. And I think the only two teams on this list that can go to Green Bay and win is Tampa Bay and San Francisco. I don't think anyone else is equipped to go and beat that team there. And so, to me, those are the only three teams you can bet on. And I just don't like Tampa Bay because I don't like the way all the things that have been happening. I don't like the way they played the last 4 or 5 weeks because yesterday doesn't count. So I wouldn't bet on them either. So really, if you're going to bet on anyone on this list, bet a big chunk on the Packers or a little chunk on the 49ers.
Or both. In the AFC. Yeah, sure. Then you got two choices. In the AFC, the Chiefs are the favorite, even though they don't have the bye. That belongs to the third choice, the Titans. I know for some of us, the Bills have been sort of our Super Bowl pick all year long. I like getting them at plus 325. I think they got a good matchup. They would have to go to Kansas City most likely next weekend, assuming both teams win. Devin, give us a value off of this list in your perspective.
I still think the Titans have some value, even though that they haven't played necessarily great down the stretch. They still got the 1 seed, and the road's going to go through Nashville. So I think the Titans still have some value there, especially if they get the running game going, get Derrick Henry back. They get that extra week for him to get back right and get back in practice shape and game shape as well. So I think the Titans still have a solid chance. Julio Jones has looked a lot better down the stretch as well, and hopefully he's healthy for that offense to make some things happen in the playoffs. So I think the Titans are still a nice long shot on this list to win. And it's just crazy that they're on the list and they're the number 1 seed.
I think, Jim, I don't know what you think about that, but I also think if Derrick Henry comes back, that price might become $275 overnight. And they are going to get a home game against the probably Bengals or Raiders. They'll be favored by a solid 6-7 points in that game. And then if they win it, they would get the Chiefs or Bills at home, both of whom they've beaten at home. So there could be value there.
I think there's a ton of value. I continue all throughout the year. I have never understood, and this goes back from when I was doing my win-loss totals. I cannot understand why the Sharps don't like Tennessee. They didn't even like Tennessee after their 4-game winning streak. They still didn't like them. And so you talk about this number. I mean, I think it's implied that Derrick Henry's coming back, right? I mean, I think it would be a surprise at this point if he doesn't come back. So yeah, the number might go down a little bit if you want to get it now. But yeah, as a number 1 seed, you telling me I can have 3.5 to 1 on the number 1 seed? Sign me up for sure. That is definitely the bargain of this list. There's no question. I don't think any of the bottom 4 teams have any chance. I won't say any chance, but not a very good chance to make it through the AFC and go to the Super Bowl. Maybe the Bengals. I've got a really good ticket on. I think I have 150 to 1 ticket on them that I bought in October. So I'm hoping I'm wrong about that, and they score their way to the Super Bowl. But yeah, Titans and Bills to me are the bets. I think the Chiefs, like I said, are going to play their best football. I don't know. I think they're going to get tripped up somewhere along the way. I don't think it's going to be this week, but I think they're going to get tripped up. So Bills and Titans are certainly my 2 picks there.
It's interesting thinking about the Titans, and one of the reasons I think that the Sharps don't like them is pass defense. And that would get super interesting if it's Bengals-Titans in divisional round weekend, because the Bengals are not going to shy away from testing that secondary. So that one would get real interesting.
You know what it does a lot in Nashville this time of year? Rain. So, I mean, if it's a nice dry field, then maybe so, but the Titans love playing in that rain, man. They moshed out Miami week before last, and they can just I think that unless it's like just this dry field with no wind. Yeah, but I mean the Titans can grind you to death too. And if Derrick Henry is even 75% of Derrick Henry, they're going to be tough to beat with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones.
It's certainly an interesting pick. Before we move on to the Super Bowl, Tad, I had pizza for lunch. I agree with you. I like pizza too. Super Bowl odds. Moving on here, and just obviously sort of a combination of the 2 lists here. Green Bay, the favorite at just under 4 to 1. This is just your top 7, but again, after you get past this, you're getting into some real long shots. I think the Bengals might be next at 15-1. But, again, I think probably same teams. Devin, we're looking at the Titans at 17-2. How about the Rams at 9-1? That's as low as they've season, I think.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think the two best values here are the two teams in the middle, and the Bucks and Titans. The Bucks, the getting 8-1 odds. I mean, they got Tom Brady. I mean that's kind of the trump card there. We would love to see obviously a Packers Bucks rematch to go to the Super Bowl again. Tom Brady against Aaron Rodgers.
I would say, speak for yourself, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with that.
I'll watch, but
But yeah, I think the Bucks and Titans have the best value here. Rams, I would have said about 3-4 weeks ago, maybe. But just the way they finished down the stretch, they have not played good football as of late. So that would be the only reason I don't think the Rams necessarily get great value here. And then Cowboys, I think it would be a little bit different if they drew a different team. Getting the 49ers in the wild card is just not a fun matchup for them. But say they can find a way to have a home playoff game for the NFC Championship per se. I think that will be an ideal situation for them, not having to play, say, the Bucks or the Packers. But I think the Bucks and Titans have the best value here.
Most likely, the other problem the Cowboys face is if they do survive the Niners, they're most Tampa Bay the following week.
That's good for them.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. Absolutely. They only lost by 2 in the home opener to start the season. I think that I was going to use that as a reason why I think the Cowboys might be a good value. They don't have to go to Green Bay in the second week. I think they match up much better against Tampa Bay, and I think they beat Tampa Bay. I think they're a better team than Tampa Bay. I really do. So I mean, the Cowboys at 12-1. I wouldn't put down a ton on it, but if you're looking for a long shot, I mean, I don't think the 49ers can win the Super Bowl. Maybe, who knows? If they get to the Super Bowl, we'll see. But I think you're better off just taking our flyer on the thing and getting the NFC. But I think I agree with what you said earlier, Zach. Whoever wins the Cowboys-49ers game, I think is going to make a little bit of a run. And I think if the Cowboys, I can tell you right now, the Cowboys will probably be about a 5 to 6 point underdog in Tampa Bay. I'm going to be all over Dallas if that happens.
I mean, I would say to that. Now, again, Tampa Bay is not quite as healthy as they were then. Dallas might not be either. They lost by 2 to Tampa Bay, by a +3 in the turnover column. So, were they competitive? Yes, they got some breaks to be competitive. They also had a couple fumbles that they were their own fumbles that they recovered. So, I don't know. I mean, I think obviously once you get to that round, anything is tough. But I don't know that that's particularly good. We'll see. Before we go back,
all I'm saying is Tampa Bay is a little bit overrated.
Yeah, and they're banged up. They are. I mean, I think not having Chris Godwin is a big deal for that team because everybody else has to kind of slide over. And AB, AB not being there, all of a sudden now you have Mike Evans and Gronk and not much else in that passing game, whereas at the beginning of the year it was the most loaded passing game in the NFL. So I do think that makes a difference. Anyway, before we circle back, that's going to kind of wrap our NFL discussion. Of course, we'll have much, much more 4 p.m. Thursday at the Book NFL Wild Card Weekend Edition, live from Harrah's Casino in New Orleans. But before we wrap it up with picks from the College Football Playoff Championship, I do want to spend a minute on basketball. Starting with the college basketball slate, here were some notable results over the weekend. Nice performance for LSU. Listen, that's about as good of a week as you could ask for. Yes, they were both home games, but that's how you stick around conference race. You beat the other good teams at home, and LSU this week was able to beat Tennessee, and then earlier in the week, was it Alabama?
No,
Kentucky. They beat Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky and Tennessee earlier in the week. Alabama lost as 14-point favorites to Mizzou, so that hurts their title credentials. Right now, it looks like Auburn is become the clear favorite in what I thought was going to be a crowded SEC race, but now Auburn is out to 3-0, and they've beaten some good teams, and they look.
It's not a coincidence you put that second on the list, is it?
I was going in chronological order after LSU,
sure you are.
I was definitely going to include it. I'll put that up. I was definitely going to include it. And then some upsets. Duke was a 15.5-point favorite, lose to Miami. Kansas, I was going to include that one too, by the way. Kansas, a 7-point favorite. They lose to Texas Tech. And then Baylor just keeps on trucking, undefeated, still undefeated. And they were undefeated deep into last season too, if you remember. They only lost a couple of games in that weird COVID year. And they look like the team to beat as well.
Well, speaking of LSU basketball, we got to toot our own horn for a minute. On Datitude on Wednesday, we'll have Dale Brown. So, speaking of the Kentucky game, they renamed the Dale Brown Court. We reached out, and he is going to come on the show. We're recording it tomorrow. He'll be on Wednesday. I'm really thrilled about that. But, I got to say, after the Auburn game, I didn't think that LSU would be able to, even at home, I thought they might be able to win one of the two games against Kentucky or Tennessee. But to beat them both is huge. And I don't remember the last time LSU was ranked as high as 12. It's been a long time. I can tell you.
It had to be the year they won the SEC. They got in the top 10, 3 years ago?
Did they get in the top 10?
I think at least for a couple of weeks, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's to be 14-1 at this point of the season. And, everybody keeps discounting them, including LSU fans, really, and alums. I think what they've done so far is amazing. You can't take anything away from them, because if you look at that roster, it's good, but it doesn't seem to me to be as good as it's been the last couple of years. So great start for them. If they can get through this brutal stretch that we talked about earlier, first 6 games SC play, if they find a way to get through that 4-2, that's kind of amazing. And then I think you really got to watch them. You got to watch them anyway.
Yeah, I think they're down to 6-1 to win the SEC. So,
yeah, I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. And you see by the Missouri went over Alabama. Anything can happen in the SEC. I know, Devin has said that kind of thing before in football, and I think it relates in basketball too. I just think this is going to be a wild and wacky year in the SEC. There'll be some big upsets, and look, I really like where Will Wade has this team right now.
LSU at Florida on Wednesday, which has been a trip that's been problematic for them for many years. And so we'll see if they can keep that rolling. Other big games, Auburn's at Alabama on Tuesday, Iowa State at Kansas. A couple teams on this list. Texas Tech is at Baylor tomorrow, so that'll be a fun game as well. Moving on, NBA, this is sort of a recap of the entire weekend. We talked on At the Book about how weird that Pelicans line was, and it actually kept moving after we got off the air all the way to the point where the Pelicans were favored, and they came through and beat the Warriors. Now it was no Steph, no Clay, no Draymond, but you still got to win the game. Other interesting thing here, Devin, is that the Bucks beat the Nets, but that's their only win in their last 5 games, and they turn around and lost to Charlotte. Pelicans lost yesterday, and then the LA teams like the Hawks lose to the Clippers, and the Hawks are a team that they were everybody's darling, made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They're 5 games below 500. It's either them or the Lakers for the most disappointing team in the NBA right now.
Yeah, and this part of the NBA season is always interesting because you look at the Bucks, they won a championship, and you can tell it's kind of a championship hangover. They'll come up and be ready to play against some of the teams that they feel like are equals, like the Nets, but you lose a game to a team like the Hornets. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch, to see how the Bucks kind of turn it on. And I expect them to go ahead and still grab a top 2, top 3 seed by the end of the season. But, winning a championship and then coming back that next year, you're just trying to get back to the playoffs so you can make that run again. So I would not be surprised if they had a much better stretch of the season after the All-Star break. But for teams like the Lakers and Hawks, pretty disappointing. Same thing with the Lakers, though. I would expect them to start turning it on over the next couple of weeks to get some wins, because you can only dig yourself so much of a hole in the Western Conference. And we know how competitive it is year in and year out. And they're going to have to really make some either serious changes with their roster or some serious changes with how they're approaching each game.
Yeah, we'll see.
But Devin, I got Lakers I got Lakers under 51 wins. Keep on losing, baby. Keep on losing.
I got it too, and they're not even going to come close. They might not win 40. This is not a good team. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline, but
Yeah, until they get to 32 losses, I'm not happy.
Yeah, you don't want to count anything, but that's not a good team. They might sneak into the playoffs like they did last year through the play-in, but they're not a good team. I just don't like them. The Pelicans, by the way, speaking of digging yourself a hole, I don't think they can make the playoffs. They are playing better ball, and they're a pretty good team to bet on right now. I mean, they've lost like 4 out of 5. They've covered 4 out of their last 5, and they've covered like 7 of their last 10. And I mean, all of a sudden, it's been a running joke in the office here at the Advocate. Listen, you can bet against the Pelicans, especially if they get out to a lead in a game. Bet against them, live bet against them. They're going to lose. That hasn't been the case the last month or so. I mean, they're actually a pretty solid team to bet on right now.
Ask Uncle Big Nick how it's going, fading them Pels. Keep fading them Pels, Uncle Big Nick.
By the way, this college basketball comment from Steve, go Tigers with defense. And that's exactly what the roster doesn't look as good. They actually play defense. They haven't done that.
Yep.
Cam Thomas, by the way, had a game winner for the Nets yesterday against who are they playing? San Antonio in overtime. Cam Thomas, who was at LSU last year, kid could always score. Never played any defense. So I don't know. Where'd Devin go?
I think he must not have liked that Cam Thomas was playing defense. I don't know.
I think Devin might just not want to. Oh, there he is. Okay. I thought maybe you didn't want to make a championship game pick, Devin, because we were at that point of the show. So, but he popped back.
I just got booted inexplicably. So
that was a pretty quick comeback, I gotta say.
We call that making a dramatic entrance. And so, with that said, let's go back to the championship game. 7 p.m. tonight. We're now zeroing in on 2 hours to kick off from Indy, Alabama, and Georgia. What is your pick, Devin Jackson?
I'm picking Georgia to win still. I just think with everything that's happened this season, with how good Georgia looked into the Alabama game, how shaky Alabama looked to the Georgia game, I think Georgia finally gets over the hump tonight and is able to beat Alabama and win a national championship. I think this Alabama team is really good, but when you compare it to some of their other championship teams, I do think there's more holes than they've had in the past. I also think, they're playing way above with their expected level of play. I mean, I think pretty much what you saw with this Alabama team throughout the season, they continuously got better, but I don't think they ever played really at an elite level to the SEC championship game. So I think Georgia wins tonight. I just have a feeling that, they're the better team. They're going to find a way to win tonight's game and finally put to bed and put to rest all the things about them not able to win a championship under Kirby Smart.
40 years since they've won one. How about a final score, Devin?
Well, I'm sticking with my under pick, so I'm going to go 27-23 Georgia.
27-23 Georgia. All right, Jim Derry.
He almost picked the exact score I was going to pick. So I don't know. I guess I'm feeling good. I hope it's not the Montana State that we got here, as opposed to the one we had the rest of the year. So I'm rooting for him to be right. I think it's 26-23 is what I had. So that's crazy. I mean, I agree with everything that he said. I mean, I've kind of said this already. I think Georgia was holding back some things. I think they look like a team on a mission. And beyond all that, I just don't think this is the same Alabama team that is won. Obviously, it's not literally the same Alabama team that won 6 championships before them, prior championships, but I just don't think it's the same caliber of team. I like Bryce Young a lot. I think he's a great young quarterback. I think he's going to be fantastic his next 2 years at Alabama, and they will be better after this year and might be the favorites going into next year. But I just think Georgia's the better team tonight. I think there was a reason why they were 6.5 point favorites a few weeks ago, and now they're only 2.5 point favorites. I think Georgia wins the game. I think it's close most of the game throughout, but I agree with Devin that I think it's under, and I think it's a pretty good defensive battle.
I'm going to bring up some analytics, so cover your ears, Jim. But you are right in saying that this, objectively speaking, Alabama team is not as good as other Alabama teams. I was listening on the radio earlier today to Brad Edwards, who used to run the BCS, whatever the bracketology version of BCS was for ESPN.com many years. Now he doesn't work for ESPN anymore, but he was saying on the radio that his efficiency metric has this Alabama team as the worst of the 9 Saban teams to make the national championship game. Now, having said that, they're making the national. They're still good, but of the 9 who have made the title game, they are the worst. And on top of that, Georgia, of the 9 opponents Alabama has faced in the championship game under Saban, Georgia is the best opponent. So this, and obviously Alabama has not won every single time. I mean, they've lost some of those. They lost to Clemson. They lost some of those other games. Objectively speaking, Georgia is the better team here, and they should win by more than 3 points, honestly. Now, if it was anybody else but Saban, I'd feel a lot more comfortable saying that. But Saban, you hate betting against him. Even Alabama gets way too many points every single week. We talk about it every single week on this show. How are they getting 18 points against Florida? How are they getting 19 points against Texas A&M? And most of the time, he finds a way to cover it. I'm just going with what the numbers tell me. I'm going actually with what my gut tells me too. I think Georgia wins. Now, this is a little bit scary that all three of us are both on Georgia and on the under, because I have 28-20 Georgia. So if you want to do like the fade bet NOLA parlay, you could go bet the over in Alabama money line, and you could probably win some money. But we're all going Georgia. We're all going the under.
We've been pretty good doing bowl season. I mean, I'm going to toot our own horn because I was last of the 4, so I can toot the horn. We were 62, 50, and 7 against the spread with our bowl picks, picking all of these games without knowing what issues were what, doing our handicap, and I think that's a phenomenal, and that includes some parlays in there as well. If you lost a parlay, it counts as a loss. So to go 62, 50, and 1 as a group, I think is pretty darn good. So I think we know what we're talking about.
You can go on to bet.nola.com and see our take, our little Final Jeopardy style picks with whatever we had left over. Allowed to bet as much as we wanted on Alabama and Georgia tonight. Again, the game kicks off at 7 p.m. on ESPN. And hey, if you go to Harrah's or you go to LeBaire somewhere and bet on this, send us your ticket on Twitter at bet.nola.com, and let us know. The handle is actually at bet_NOLA. So at bet_NOLA. Follow us on Twitter. Send us your ticket of who you bet on. Maybe you did the anti-bet.NOLA parlay and did a Alabama with the over, or maybe you rode with us. Maybe you like the under and Georgia. I may go bet that parlay myself. I like that. A couple minutes left here on Odds and Ends. Devin Jackson, your final thoughts.
I'm excited for tonight's game. I think there's obviously going to be a lot of future NFL players on the field, both sides of the ball. So you'll be hearing their names not only tonight, but over the next couple of years in the NFL level. But this is probably one of the best matchups we've had in the college football playoff. When you think about it, just from a team perspective, kind of how both sides are kind of contrasting in the way they do things, and just how good both teams are. I think this may be one of the better ones we've had, and that's saying with these two teams, we saw a thrilling game last time these two teams played in the national championship. So I think this is going to be a really good game. There's going to be a lot of good football played tonight, and gets us started and ready for the NFL playoffs over the next couple of weeks.
That's right. The last championship game between these two was Tua to Devontae Smith in overtime for the victory. So,
and they're
Jim,
both
you're
playing in the NFL now. So
that's right. Yeah.
My wallet still pokes me a little bit from that game. It still hurts. I haven't learned a lesson, obviously. The question is, it's kind of, you brought it up, Zach. The question tonight is, will Kirby Smart have a lead in the fourth quarter, look over and say, oh, bleep, it's Nick Saban?
Why are my pants wet?
Exactly. I mean, you don't know how he's going to react again. I mean, it's just something about looking over there with those arms crossed during a game. It's just something about that. I mean, I don't know what it is. It's like he's like the devil. There's a reason why I call him Satan and not Saban. He's like, the game will change now, you little minion, and it changes. So I mean, that's the only thing that makes me nervous. Like I think our handicaps are all correct. I think we all know that Georgia's the better team. That doesn't mean Georgia's going to win. So we can handicap the game and make our predictions and say what we think is going to happen and what should happen and all that goodness. But I mean, I guess maybe if I were on the other sideline too, and I look over and I'm like, "You're right, sir. I'll bow down to you again. I
will capitulate."
You just have to hope that doesn't happen if you're betting on Georgia.
I'm looking. That's right. I I'm looking forward a lot to it. I'm also looking forward to mobile betting in the state of Louisiana. It is coming this month. NOLA.com/Caesars. Get you signed up. Get your bonus, $100. More bonuses to come. If you sign up now, you are still eligible for all of those bonuses, so don't waste any time. NOLA.com/Caesars. We will be back with you at 4 p.m. Thursday for At the Book. We'll talk more NFL wildcard weekend. We didn't really talk any Black Monday in the NFL. Lots of Brian Flores getting fired. Where the hell did that come from? But we'll talk more about that as some news starts to trickle out, and we'll get some more basketball involved as well, and our final takes on the championship game. So we'll see you at 4 p.m. on Thursday for At the Book. This has been Odds and Ends. For Devin Jackson and Jim Derry, I'm Zach Ewing.
Go Dogs.